Welcome to Listen by Gene Ginsberg. This audio experience and podcast is all about social media, digital marketing, entrepreneurship, and interviews with top entrepreneurs in the digital and social space. I am your host, Gene Ginsberg, digital marketing expert, #1 best-selling author, and award-winning entrepreneur. I will be sharing with you strategies, tips, and tactics on how to grow your business and your social media following. Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, Gene Ginsberg here, and welcome to another episode of Listen by Gene Ginsberg. And very excited today because I have a special guest, Tony Martignetti. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I'm very happy that you're here, and I just wanted to start off, always usually ask the question of to kind of get get the context for our audiences is tell us about your background.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you for having me on, by the way, Gene. Appreciate it. So a little background. I am a coach who came from the background of being in biotech. I worked in finance and strategy for biotech companies for a number of years, almost 25 years. And if I go even further back, I was an artist as a child who then moved into the world of science and then eventually into business. And eventually I came to this point where I said, I think it's time for me to make a change and do something that's a little more aligned with who I truly am. And that's when I had my moment that jumped me out into the world of becoming a leadership coach and working with people to align with their inspired purpose.
Wow. Okay. So tell us about what you're doing now based on your purpose.
Yeah. So what I do is I help accomplish leaders to become more aligned with their true purpose in the world. And oftentimes people come to me after having a long career of doing something that is really amazing, but they feel stuck. They feel like they're unfulfilled. They're not really lit up any longer. And so oftentimes what I'm doing is I'm working with them to see that there's another way. There's another way to look at things. I talk about this in the analogy of the climbing the right mountain as opposed to the wrong mountain, which
right.
Oftentimes we get stuck on.
Yes. So this is a very interesting topic for me, right? I mean, I think for everybody, right? What is your purpose? So how do you determine that? I mean, how do you get that out of people, right? Like, let's say I'm coming to you, I'm a leader or an executive, and maybe I have been in the right path, maybe I haven't. So how do you really tease that out?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to get people to stop, beating yourself up, stop worrying about what's happening right now, and just think about your past for a moment. I think about the work I do as being like a time traveler with the people who I work with. I take them into their past and I get them to think about, where are you coming from? What's the inventory of stories and values and strengths that you've really accumulated along this journey? And a lot of that comes from the wounds and the failures that we've had.
Right.
So it can be challenging, but I also know that those challenges are a lot of things that we've overcome and now become strengths. Once we go in the past, then we look into the future. We envision, what do we want for that future? If we don't know what that future is, then it's hard to make any steps in any direction, really. And so to step into that future, what we first have to do is step away, expand our vision, and then narrow our focus, which is a thing I say often to people. You got to look at new possibilities. So if you're just myopically looking at just this thing, then maybe there's other opportunities that you're just not seeing because you're too focused on one thing. And then once you identify that, now let's look at your present. What can you do right now that will help you to move forward, acting in the present? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what I do.
And what about a big transformation? Somebody you've worked with, give us an example. Maybe they were, a VP of some company, a big company, and now they decided, hey, I just want to open up my own, ice cream shop or something like that. Have you experienced these kinds of big transformations where people finally find themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've worked with a number of different industries and different people at different levels of sorts. But the reality is that there's been the story that comes to mind almost immediately is, the financial executive who was struggling to be, come out of the mold of being the technical expert, not really the person who's seen as the CFO, but more that technical expert. And once he got out of that mold and, came to me, was in transition, and then realized that, wow, like, I want to find a job that is going to be more aligned with what I'm looking for and not what I've been known for in the past. So we started to have these conversations, kind of seeing how he's showing up. And the more we worked together, he ended up getting a job with a small biotech company, then realizing how he was showing up could be different and how he could see people differently. Emotional intelligence went through the roof, which was amazing, and then started to raise to the roof in terms of how he was promoted into his new role where he was the CFO. It's really amazing to see the change in the time we were working together, how just changing his view about what he sees gave him the ability to show up differently and then create what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good point. And I just wanted to kind of ask the question. The next question is, it's kind of, I would imagine, hard to pinpoint, right? Like that you maybe don't have the right passion or you're maybe in the wrong spot, right? What is typically the experiences that people go through right before they engage with you, right? Like what is the problem that they're looking to solve?
Yeah, so it's great. It's almost like another way of asking that question is like, how do you know when you're on the wrong mountain?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like how do you know? With small things, it's like, oh, my shoes are torn up, so I need to buy a new pair of shoes, right? Like you kind of replace the old pair of shoes because your shoes are worthless now. But now it's like this much bigger thought of like, how do I know if I'm on the wrong path or the wrong mountain?
Yeah. What I mostly see is people come to me when there is this moment where they're like, look, I don't really have a desire. And when I go to work, there's nothing that really excites me. I don't have any, real reason to want to get out of bed any longer. I've lost my passion for the things that I do. And there was a reason why I did it in the first place. And maybe it's not always about leaving your job and doing something like on your own as an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's just about changing the way you look at the job that you have. And the people who come to me, oftentimes they just lost their passion for what they do because they don't see it anymore. And I often ask this one question and it changes everything. What is it about next week that you're looking forward to? And if they can't point out one thing in their schedule for next week that they're looking forward to, then they've got some problems. It might be a sign that there's something wrong. And when you're climbing the wrong mountain, the right mountain, there's growth, there's struggle. It's not easy, but you find value in that struggle. You find that you enjoy the process of becoming who you want to be. And that's what's beautiful, is that you don't necessarily, you're not really worried about being happy when you get to this place of getting that promotion or getting to that thing. Instead, it's like you find joy and fulfillment in the process of becoming who you are.
Wow. I love that, because it's something to think about when you are going through that, right? It's not always just like, oh, I get to top the mountain, I'm so happy. It's like, but what is the process of actually climbing the mountain, right? And that's, sometimes we forget that so often, but it's a very critical point, right? Because you spend more time climbing versus actually getting to the top. You might get to the top, but you're there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then you're done. And it might be even anticlimactic, right? But the process is the more important piece of it, because it's a much longer piece.
Exactly, especially in this day and age when there's so many people who are having multiple different careers. Like, we've come to this place where this generation, the generations of now versus the baby boomers, there was, as a baby boomer, there was so many, like you just came to your job and you just did your job.
Yeah.
And you had one career your entire life, most likely. And, as we stepped into the Gen Z and beyond, it was Gen X and beyond, I should say, there was an element of like, my gosh, like we have multiple careers potentially, and we don't want to be defined any longer. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's a challenging thing, because then you're always thinking, what's next? But we have to really see the value in all the things that we're becoming along that path.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is brought to you by the Digital Marketing Method monthly group coaching program, your methodology for growing your business and your social media following. Join me and my group of supportive entrepreneurs and learn how you can grow your business and your social media following, where we cover topics such as Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, email marketing, and so much more. Go to dmgroup.online, dmgroup.online. It's true. Like, you probably just, I had a job for 35 years at one company, and whether you liked it or not, that was the only option really that you had, or maybe very few other options. We have so many more options now. So it's a very different paradigm shift that we ever experienced over the last, 30, 40 years, right, than our fathers or grandfathers experienced, right? Of course, one point I wanted to discuss is, we've been in a pandemic, and although we're coming out of it finally, it seems like, I don't know where you are, but in Denver, we have pretty much done with the pandemic for the most part. How have things changed on your end? Have you seen more people coming to you and being like, hey, I hate my life and I want to change, or less, or maybe no change at all during the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of both. I should say there's been an element of there's a lot more people coming out of the woodworks around transitions, and I'm still working with a fair amount of people who are inside organizations, and they're just looking to develop their skills, developing a new perspective on their work. But definitely it's starting to really pick up lately, because there's this sense that right now, as we emerge, people are looking for a fresh start. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, and I've been grateful to be able to be the person who can help support people on that journey. I think for me personally, it's been an interesting time because I've been really creative and kind of finding different ways to tap into my own way of creating connection during the time of being separated from people. And I started my own podcast, which was the Virtual Campfire, which has been really a great journey. I think podcasting is such a great avenue, right? And then writing the book, which was the climbing the right mountain. Like, that was a year in the making. I jokingly say it's a concise book. It's a short book, but it's very concise, but it still doesn't diminish the amount of time it takes to make the book. So that's been my journey over the past year.
I can definitely relate. I wrote a book about 4 years ago, and definitely a big project, I have to say. I don't know if I would be able to do it now. I just how busy things have gotten with business. I think 4 years ago, things were a little bit less busy, and I was actually at the time to put together a book. I did it in 4 months. I started in May and then published it in September. So is your book already out now?
Yes, it is. It's available on Amazon. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. So it's called Climbing the Right Mountain, and it's really a book that really tells the tale about what brought me out of my own journey in corporate. But it's not just about my story. It's about giving people some tools to help them navigate their path to getting on the right path for them, using some guideposts so they can step into that. One of the guideposts I often talk about is this, evaluate your footprint, which is around, what is the ripple effect you want to have on other people? Like, how are you showing up to the world you're in? And the more you get more mindful of that impact you're having, the better off you are. What you put out is what you get back.
Right. It's always like that. That's always the case, right? Sometimes we expect more, but it's like you get it. You get out what you put in, right? You reap what you sow. We've actually had a number of guests on this podcast that talk about the future of work, and of course, you are in that space. Definitely from a leadership perspective. But what do you think what is your thoughts on the future of work?
Yeah, I think the future work's really going to be an interesting time, because we're going to be finding people are going to be becoming more adaptable. We're going to be able to deal with change more effectively, and it's being forced upon us, but now we're also building the skills to be that adaptable. Connection, human connection is going to be so important, and it's going to be taking on a new form of, that virtual is not going away. It's going to become integrated in the experience, but we also have to come back together in person. So we're going to find that mix and blend. The hybrid is going to be so important to get it right, to ensure that we do find a way to get that human connection, to get back together, but also understand that, wow, we've tapped into some real magic with the virtual world. So I think for me, I see that adaptability and that mixing and finding the right blend of in-person and virtual is going to be where the future really lies.
Yeah, I actually have a couple thoughts on the future of work based
Please.
on just what I have thought. Well, first of all, robotics, right? Like that's going to be a big change, right? A lot of businesses or a lot of jobs might become obsolete because we will have robots doing the job. So that's something nobody ever wants to talk about. Or I guess it's not being talked about as much, right? Because it is a big impact on the economy, on people's lives, right? I'm actually kind of excited about it because I think that I'm kind of come from the mindset of like efficiency, right? As much as we can be efficient, of course, there's going to create a lot of issues with the economy and people being out of work. But I think that the solution to that is more finding other ways to employ those people, right? Instead of we've gone through this history time and time again, right? Like automation has been on the rise over the last 200 years. This is not a new thing. This has definitely been something that's been going on, and that happens all the time. Every generation there's automation and people lose their jobs, but then they are able to find new jobs, right? So I have faith in that, in the sense that we will these people will find new jobs. And then the other piece is which I've spoken to a few of the guests here also, is about education, right? And skills, right? Because college, in my opinion, college is an antiquated thing at this point because of how quickly things are moving and how quickly skills are changing and how quickly we need to learn new skills. And for example, in my area of industry, digital marketing, it's like that's not something that you can really learn in college at this point. And even if you do, things change very quickly. So even if you got a degree in digital marketing 4 years ago, I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg has already changed Facebook about 17 times since then, if not more. And there's been a lot of new features. And so that is the other piece that I think is going to be, and has already started the process since COVID, is the change in education and the change in acquiring skills and how quickly we can acquire skills now because of the internet. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I love that you share this, because on both fronts, I think you're absolutely right on the money. I just had a conversation about the education system. It's just interesting that it's not going to be like completely, throw it all away, but we have to just change the way what we're teaching. It's not about the more technical skills that we're going to be working with. It's about the teaching how to learn and creating the capacity to deal with the future. It's literally going to be so much more important to learn the capacity to adapt. That's really what we're going to be learning more about. And because it's going to be about, as you said, things are changing so rapidly out there, that we cannot be teaching antiquated things from the moment people enter higher education. So it's about really helping them to understand, how do I ensure that the things I'm learning today, I have the ability to see beyond it, to think outside that box, which I love. I think that's really where we're finally kind of grasping that. And then on the robotics, I think you're absolutely right. We're being disrupted all the time, and we have to see beyond the disruption and say, how can we be part of that change and think beyond what that change is? How can we be creating something that's new? I come back to this book, which was written a long time ago by the founders of LinkedIn. One of the guys. It's called The Startup of You. The Startup of You, and it really comes down to this idea that we're all startup companies of our own self. We're companies, and we have to always be thinking, well, what do I need to be learning next so that I stay relevant, so I stay ahead of the curve? Likening the whole comparison of Detroit to Silicon Valley. Detroit thought they were the top of the world. They're never going to be changed. And then Japan happened. Silicon Valley is always thinking, what's next? What's next? We can't rest. We have to continue to move forward. We kind of have to think that way, not in a maniacal focus, but to be thinking, how do I evolve? How do I pivot to the next thing for me? Makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, yeah. I think about that all the time for myself, for my business every day, right? Like what do I do? What can I change? What can I improve? How can I make things better? That's the problem with all of these businesses that we saw that went out of business is complacency, right? Like why is Toys R Us no longer around? Why is Woolworth no longer around? Or what, all of these old brands that we all knew as growing up, no longer around. And why? Because they decided not to move forward with everyone else. And they thought that, oh no, we're good where we are. And then things happen. And now they're happening even more rapidly. And those businesses that are not getting on board are going to be left behind and eventually go out of business. We've seen this time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, last question I always like to ask. We kind of touched upon it, but maybe another thought. The last question is, what is your prediction for the future? And it could be about work, the future of work. It could be about self-driving cars, going to Mars. It could be robotics, AI, whatever you think, whatever's top of health, the future of healthcare and longevity. I've had people talk about that. Whatever's top of mind for you, or it could be specifically about what you're doing. Always love to hear what are people's on top of mind of other people on this podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be a little selfish, and I'm gonna say that this is my prediction, or it's more my desire for what I think the future will be like, if I have anything to say about it. I really think that any businesses of tomorrow are going to start to see that although we'll have all this innovation, that at the heart of it all, that people are going to be at the core of every business, and that people before profit is going to be so important, and that we're going to move beyond the metric of employee engagement, which I think is an employer-focused metric. And instead be talking about employee enrichment as the marker of, we bring people to our workplace to make them better people. And by doing so, we create better profits, products, and we're driven by purpose. So
I love that. It is always goes back to people, right? It is, that's what drives everything. That's what makes the world go round, is people. So awesome. Well, this was a great conversation. I love talking about the future of work and leadership, of course. One of my favorite topics besides digital marketing and social media. But this is all integrated with being an entrepreneur, right? I mean, there's a lot of changes going on, and we have to make sure that we're staying on top of it. So really appreciate you being here, Tony Martignetti. Just want to make sure I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. And the book is called Climb Your Mountain.
Climbing the Right Mountain.
Climbing the Right Mountain. So check it out on Amazon. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.